All right. Well, as you're joining in, we've got Phil Jones and I've got a short bio. Phil, thank you for putting that on your website. So much easier to just grab and read. So I'm going to read it really quick. Here's a short bio. Thanks to Phil. Audiences have referred to Phil Jones, Phil M. Jones, as the world's leading sales trainer, and having reached more than 2 million people with his magic words, authoring 4 best-selling books and scooping multiple awards. They might just be right, which they are, by the way. Having spoken to audiences in more than 56 countries across 5 continents, this cheeky London chap, known as Mr. Magic Words, will be sure to put a smile on your face while sharing his hard-hitting sales expertise. Do they actually call you Mr. Magic Words, Phil?
They used to. They used to, yeah. And in fact, I think you found an old bio, I think is what you found there as well, which is interesting. It's
Dude,
fun. But yeah, my
good.
book for Exactly What to Say was a book called Magic Words. So that Exactly What to Say is the rewrite of one of my early books. And we're now 11 books, which is what's out there in the world.
Man. Well, that's why we're here. Exactly what to say. You skyrocketed in the real estate world super fast because it's really important. I mean, when I was in law school, I remember our law professor, our torts professor, saying to all of the law students, they're like, we're wordsmiths. That's what we are. We're wordsmiths, everyone. And then when I
Yeah.
jumped into real estate, I'm like, wait a second, I think that applies here too. Which
It
is
applies
interesting.
everywhere. I've learned to believe that winning or failing at life is almost entirely dependent upon knowing exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to make it count. It isn't simply hard work and endeavor and product knowledge. Those things are important, but they get you in the game. They don't get you on the podium.
That's very true. And Robert, thank you for the connection, man. So uh, for those of you who don't know Robert, he runs a big organization out of, are you guys mainly out of Florida, but extended everywhere in the US, but running it out of Florida, Robert?
Headquarters is in Maryland, technically. I live in Florida.
Got it. Well, dude, I talk to you the most. So to me, it's like Florida. And for those of you who don't know, he's the magic man when it comes to making sure everything is functioning well on the back end with a well-oiled machine in real estate. So the Lucido Group, for those of you who don't know, he also has other companies as well. So Robert, welcome. Robert and I are going to run this with Phil. We're going to be asking him some great questions. Hopefully they're great. If you have some questions, add them into the chat, put them into the Q&A. This is recorded. It'll go on our YouTube channel and then on our other channels as well. So welcome to all of our lab code agents. Remember, all, what, 500,000 of you? So thank you. Robert, where do you want to start with Phil, man?
Well, first, I just want to note that there are 12 books written by people on this call, of which I've contributed 0. So kudos to you two.
I thought we missed one with Phil. I'm like, wait, Phil doesn't know he wrote it.
I'm talking about your book, Tristan.
I know, I didn't even so.
I have more professional home runs though, so that evens the score. Anyways, well, first, I'm just curious, what came first, a little bit of background before we get into the NAR issues and following up on that. I'm curious, Phil, how did you get into the business essentially of writing these books, and more so in general, the sales aspect of things? What drew you to that? Have you always had an affinity to it, or was there a certain moment?
I mean, I've always liked the idea of being able to change my own life by inviting other people to part with money for services that I provide or services other people provide. Like, that is something that has been inherent in me from a very young age. I was building businesses in my teens. By the age of 15, I was making more money than the bulk of my school teachers. And I learned very early on in life that if you do not ask, you do not get. But then I learned that it's not just asking, it's how you ask, when to ask. It's what you say when you ask that drives a lot of difference. And I then found myself in a very interesting predicament. In my late teens, early 20s, I was running big sales teams for one of the largest department store retail groups in the UK. And I was 19, 20, 21, running teams of 60, 70, 80 people responsible for 12, 15 million pound turnover. And I looked like I was 5 years younger than I was. Tons of age prejudice that was thrown back at me for running big businesses at that time. And I learned that the only way I could lead people was to never give any direct advice. I'd just find people that are crushing it, and then I'd share I'd say, hey, Robert, like, I know that Tristan is doing significantly better than you at blank, and that's something you'd look to be able to work on. There are 3 things that Tristan does that you don't do. Would you like to know what they are? And obviously, you'd love to know what they are. So my leadership style became studying excellence in other people and then using that to be able to translate that excellence towards others. And I started to see patterns. Is anybody who was any good at anything, they didn't just have hard work and endeavor. They had efficacy in the moments that mattered repeatedly with word tracks. And it wasn't just being a skilled communicator, it was consistently being a skilled communicator in many of a known moment. This blew my mind. I'm like, oh, so this can be engineered. This can be repeated. I built businesses. I carried on running a sales leadership career. I built a big real estate business in 2007, 2008, 2009. We brought that business down. And then I wondered what I wanted to do next. And I kept getting invited in by BNI groups and chambers of commerce and big networking organizations that we'd used a lot to grow businesses prior. And they would ask me to help their members come up with some ideas as to how they could trade out of a recession. So I started to just create content and share out of a passion project while I was figuring out what business I wanted to build next. And people would ask me questions following my 30 minutes and 60-minute training sessions. They're like, have you got more? Have you got more? I'm like, yeah. They're like, could you run a day for some of our members? I'm like, yeah, I could run a day, I think. And they'd say things like, well, will it cover blank? And I said, sure. And then I wrote that thing down. And I remember going into my first one-day sales training program that all I did the night before, I looked at all the will it cover blank questions. And then I used that information to articulate my first one-day sales training program. We sold tickets for £85 a head. And what's kind of interesting is fast forward from that 08, 09 one-day training program, that exact same content I delivered as a one-man show for Audible in a theater off Broadway maybe 5 years ago, and got paid high 6 figures for that one same day piece of content. So what has been interesting is that I've been helping non-salespeople to sell more effectively now for 25 years. Worked in over 800 different industries. And I've learned that every industry has more similarities than differences. I know there are differences industry to industry, but they have more similarities and differences because we're looking at helping people make more informed decisions. And I've spent all that time trying to help people realize that being salesy doesn't mean being slimy. Being a sales professional means asking intelligent questions, collecting a body of evidence. The real enemy to sales success isn't no, it's maybe. It's indecision. It's people that are not making their mind up. All your job is to help the right people choose you at the right time and the wrong people choose you quickly so that they don't do business with you and you get your time back. And this is becoming more apparent, but it's been foreign for quite some time. I think people have viewed success in sales as something that most people don't want to be. We've grown up around winning in sales environments is like Glengarry Glen Ross or Wolf of Wall Street. And as we sit here in 2024, 2025, we all know that you only win when the other person wins. You only win as a byproduct of achieving success for others. And that's exciting to me. It's the most exciting time that I've ever seen in this industry, is realizing that finally nice guys can win ball games.
I love that. It resonates. I read a few weeks ago, I was reading a part of Russell Brunson's book, and he basically has a line, I'm going to paraphrase here, that, you know, if you don't have enough money either for yourself or for your business, what you're really saying is you don't have the ability to convince other people to give you their money. And in that respect, that's the fundamental of what business is, because every business comes down to a transaction. In both, you know, the UK and the United States, it's purely voluntary. Mm-hmm. Both sides have to consent. Therefore, you have to be convincing in how you communicate to make that sale. The other thing I picked up on is, I think this is just a common trajectory on how everyone gets started. I was listening to a podcast this morning of someone that's added 2.5 million followers in the last 2 years to his social channels. And people go to where they've gotten value before. They return to where they've gotten value previously in search of more value. So as long as you're contributing value either to, you know, bystanders or clients or your sphere, they'll come back to you looking for more value. In a negative way, it's why people always return to their exes, because there was some value that they got in the past, but this is at least more positive. What do you think, T?
Dude, I agree with that, man. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's hard to argue with that one, right?
Mhm.
I'm thinking something along the same lines. Phil, when it comes to the title, what exactly what to think, exactly what to say, I was thinking, when you've done this now for a few years, do you find that it reverses into what you think as a human? It starts with you telling people what to say, and then because they say it so often, it starts making them believe that other things are possible because of what they're saying. Is that typically how it starts, or does it start with what you think? Where does it typically start from what you see?
There's the question you were meaning to ask, right? Is where does it typically start rather than leading? And there is nothing that happens without thinking first. How you think, though, is a byproduct of the questions that you ask yourself. So when I wrote the book, Exactly What to Say, I should have titled it Exactly What to Ask. Only that wouldn't have resonated with people so much. You are a byproduct of the quality of the questions you ask of yourselves and others. There is nothing more to it than that. Every day, you are a product of the questions you ask yourself and the question you ask of others. Every moment is impacted by the questions you ask yourself and the questions you ask of others. And your ability to be able to have more meaningful conversations with yourselves and others will change your world. So, yes, every single piece of the body of work that we teach around Exactly What to Say should probably start with self first. We teach a model that says there are 3 critical ingredients to be more effective in any given conversation. And I know we're talking about NAR right now, but we could equally be talking about self. The starting point for every great conversation is one of curiosity. Behind curiosity is empathy. Behind empathy is courage. It's always going to run in that order, whether you're trying to influence a teenager in your life to finally put the sneakers away, or whether you're looking to influence a seller to list with you at an obnoxious fee. Like, it's the same game. Why is curiosity the starting point? Because curiosity earns you context. Without context, you're shooting in the dark. You start to be able to see the world from somebody else's point of view. Stay curious for long enough, you demonstrate empathy. What empathy is to care about what the person you care about care about. And most real estate professionals miss this. They think that the hero of the story needs to be them and their brilliance. They turn up with the I, me, my story all the time.
We love
Some of them-
awards, man. We say we love awards.
Yeah, exactly. It's the my dad's better than your dad argument at every listing presentation, right? Like, that's what happens. And it's only once you demonstrate empathy that you can start to access the big courageous asks that we know that drive action. But the real estate industry fascinates me because you all have to realize that nobody wants to buy a house. Not one person on the planet wants to buy a house. And equally, nobody wants to sell a house either. They want to buy a house because, and they want to sell a house because. If you do not know what that because is, good luck. The best you can do is add features and benefits to your list of services. And you want to see the big mistake that I'm seeing agents make right now as we come through this NAR settlement piece? The biggest mistake I'm seeing agents make repeatedly is to show up and throw up with a giant list of services that could make them valuable to somebody else and think that that's helpful. They are walking themselves into a known objection. If you give somebody a shopping list of 20 things that make you worth your money, and I only need 6 of them, how much less do I want to pay?
Earlier this year, NAR put out a list of the 182 things a buyer agent does. And many of our own agents who are great agents thought it was the greatest thing in the world. It was 12 pages long. Are you going to take an agent through 12 pages of stuff? People have a misconception. They think people buy because the sum of everything you offer. In reality, they buy because one thing is worth it to them. And
maybe with 3 behind it, some weight.
And you only find out what that one thing is by entering it with curiosity. And you're exactly right. People sell services instead of selling solutions. You can't sell a solution unless you know the problem you're trying to solve. And that's why you got to be really effective with discovery and ask the right questions, as Phil says.
Yeah. Show somebody you understand their problem. They'll trust you with the solution. Try and sell them on your solution. They'll say that's not the problem.
And we're always
this is for agents everywhere. And also, like, if we're talking value, which I think is a key thing of what we put on the title coming into this conversation today, note this, is that your value is only valuable where it is both appreciated and it's appreciating. Both those things need to happen. where it's appreciated and it's appreciating. And let's look at that appreciated first of all. Is who on this call here right now listening to us would love to be the proud owner of a pink, inflatable, sparkly, sequined, inflatable dinghy? Who would like to own one of those? And what if it's $300? Anybody fancy it? My guess is there might be one person who's like, I'm in. But most of you, like Tammy here, are saying, no, thank you, not for me. What if you're out on a lake and in the middle of the lake, you're on your boat starts sinking. You're a mile from shore and someone's offering you the same inflatable dinghy? Who fancies it now? How much would you pay for it? Do you mind where it's made? Do you care about what color it is? Like you go like, nope, 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 give me, you can take all the money in the world and I'll take this from you right now. It's about value in circumstances. See, there could be only one reason somebody be prepared to pay your big fee and 1,000 reasons why they wouldn't. This means that if you're going to look to demonstrate value at a higher level in today's market, you have to add specificity. I believe that you cannot show up and say, here's the value I provide to buyers. You need to look at saying what is valuable to a first-time buyer, what is valuable to somebody who's moving from out of state, what is valuable to somebody who's a move-up buyer, what is valuable to somebody who's relocating from the other side of town. Different values, right? Do you know there are only 4 things that anybody finds valuable? There are only 4 things that people will part with money for. Only 4. One is more money. I will give you money if you give me more money. If it's not money, it's time. I will give you money if you save or make me time. If it's not money or time, it's risk. I will give you money if you can mitigate risk. And if it's not money, time, or risk, it's status. I will give you money if it helps me elevate my status. Either in theory, as in like how I feel about myself, or in actuality. So when you're looking to be able to explain to others how you're valuable, if you can't turn it into the reason you pay me more is because I get you more, the reason you pay me more is because I save you or make you time, the reason that you pay me more is because I mitigate you risk, or the reason you pay me more is because it helps you have elevated status, you're missing the point. And you probably should be able to take every single person that you work with and say, here's how I make you money or save you money. Here's how I make or save you time. Here's how I mitigate your risk. And here's how you elevate your status from working with me. Get that right, people will go, that's worth it. Get that wrong, spray and pray.
In your experience, which do you think is the most powerful driver there of the 4?
Depends.
On the person?
It depends. It depends on the circumstances and the context.
Okay.
But we were chatting just before we opened up and Tristan talked about being a lawyer. Like which one of those things would be most valuable in choosing a lawyer? Well, it depends, right?
Yeah.
Is somebody might want a high-level lawyer because the prestige of having that person associated to themselves or their brand would give them an elevated status versus other people in their community. They might be like, well, actually, I want you because you're the world's best at helping mitigate my risk. The other might be, dang, you're cheap and can get this thing done. The other reason might be like, you're remarkably expensive and that makes me feel better about myself. The other thing might be, well, you have so much emotional intelligence about my circumstances. You can do stuff in a proactive way that it saves me time. I'm less involved. So it depends. Let's just look at a first-time buyer. Like a first-time buyer definitely doesn't want to overpay, but they definitely don't want to buy the wrong house. The cost of getting the wrong house is expensive. First-time buyer has multiple variables like area and region, and do I buy an apartment or do I buy a bigger house and a fixer-upper? Do I buy something that's done that has like a new construction with guarantees and warranties? They have all of these reasons that are spinning around that a more sophisticated buyer that's buying their 3rd or 4th home doesn't value. Somebody buying from out of town might really appreciate that you'll do FaceTime walkthroughs. Somebody buying from out of town might really appreciate that you can get them floor plans on houses that don't have floor plans to save them going out to see something they were never going to buy. You see what I mean? Is once you start to say, I know the buyer or I know the seller, the list of things that become remarkably valuable is really important. And if you look at those 3 things and maybe ignore status for a second, make money or save money, time, or risk, you could probably take every group of people that you're looking to serve and you could find the big one on those 3 areas that would be valuable to them. What you then have is a 3-legged stool in every conversation. The one big thing that's most important to them, backed up with 2 heavyweight backup dancers. Like if you were a first-time buyer, Robert, and you were concerned about buying in the wrong area, then what you could do is you could talk about the value that you would provide to help somebody do pros and cons of all the different areas so that they mitigate their risk, that they have something that is going to have long-term capital appreciation and it's going to help them be able to buy in an area that they're not going to need to move from. If they're not going to need to move from it, big risk. Oh, and by the way, I'm also going to make sure you don't overpay for the house. And by the way, is because of the team that I have available, we're going to save you a boatload of time because we're going to shortlist what you don't want to be able to go and see. We're going to get you photos on things that don't have good photos. We'll go see things for you midweek while you're working so that when you are going out the weekend to look at homes, you're not looking at anything you definitely don't want to go see. So we're saving you time.
You know, I think, you know, Einstein said, if you don't understand something, if you can't express something simply, you don't understand it, you're not truly an expert. I think that construct of those 4 things is very powerful. And if when I listen to you think the average agent probably is only appealing to one of them, even if that's the lowest motivating factor in that buyer's decision.
Correct.
Yeah, they're showing them, you know, recent comps or sale results. They may not care about that at all. They may just want to dispose of the asset as quickly as possible, or they're looking for a status. I know one guy down here that bought a multi-million-dollar house. He had a multi-million-dollar penthouse to sell, didn't want to sell it for below a price, purely driven by how people would perceive that. It wasn't about ROI. It wasn't about time for him. It was all about status for that one individual. So I think
that's ego, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Ego play. On the listing side, I see the assumption all the time of agents believing that what value looks like is selling it for the most money in the quickest period of time. Very rarely is that actually what somebody's looking for. They're often looking for a level of convenience. They're looking for a timeline that suits some form of precise environment or dance that they're having in their own life. They're looking to be able to understand what the process is going to look like for minimum disruption inside of their day-to-day routine. The factors that go into them choosing an agent isn't necessarily this amazing game plan where you're going to bring 1,000 people over their threshold and the house needs to be looking perfect in every given day. Like I've sold property in the past for 5 to 10% less than I could have done because I didn't want to have showings. I wanted a discrete transaction. I wanted a timeline that suited me. And that was worth more to me than an aggressive marketing campaign with huge amounts of visibility coming towards it and us needing to have the house ready at a moment's notice. Me having, 12 to 20 weeks of a timeline to be able to move out with one buyer and it all being done with discretion was more valuable to me than the uplift that I could have achieved in price. And I think our knowledge of this is where you get to stand out, is to make no predetermined assumptions.
So let me ask you a larger question. So you said this, the book's exactly what to say, which everyone on the call should go buy it and read it. Fantastic. Also, there's cards to help you actually implement it. But it's called Exactly What to Say, but it really should have been called Exactly What to Ask. So most salespeople, if you actually look at a distribution of salespeople's performance in relation to the questions that they ask, poor salespeople will actually front load their discovery. In other words, they go in, they ask a few questions, and as soon as they get an answer, they just start dictating. They just start cutting people off and telling them. So my question to you is, all right, we enter into a call. We know the construct. They're either looking for more money, time, mitigating risk, or status. We're trying to determine which category is a motivating factor and what specifically is. At what point do you pivot, if at all, to basically telling your worth? Or instead, do you stay in curiosity and still try to ask it as questions? How do you handle that?
How do you think I handle it?
I think the optimal sale. Oh, well, good. See what I did there? It's funny because I was just going to say that. I think the optimal sale is when you know what you want them to say, so you ask the question that guides them there. However, that's pretty skill. So it's going to take time and experience. Now, when you get someone that's really not connecting the dots, maybe it's because they don't have experience or anything like that. They don't know the ins and outs of things. at what point will you tell them, how we get there, or what we offer to mitigate that risk, or what we offer in order to help save time?
I'm going to give an easy answer to this question because that's what you're looking for. You should never, ever, 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 ever advise anybody to do anything unless you can say these words first. And the words you should look to be able to say first are the words "because of the fact that you said." Because of the fact that you said blank, blank, and blank, for those reasons, what I'd recommend is blank, blank, and blank.
And by doing that, because I 100% agree, by doing that, it guarantees what?
It's a custom recommendation, unique to their set of circumstances. And I'd view it like the medical industry. In the medical industry, they say prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. Same is true in the real estate business. Easiest way to differentiate yourself versus everybody else in the industry is to stop showing up and throwing up. Like, I delivered a 90-minute workshop that I was asked to deliver for Keller Williams at their family reunion. And the premise of the large workshop was how to deliver a more effective listing presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I spent 90 minutes telling people to not deliver a listing presentation. Like the easiest way to win a listing is to not tell them about your marketing plan and all the wonderful things you can do to help them sell the house. It's to help them realize that you understand how important this house is to them. And the easiest place to start is with the questions they know the answers to. Nobody does this. Where would I start on a listing presentation? Is I'd start by saying, well, how long have you folks lived here? And they're like, I know this one. Have you? And you said, well, what was it that prompted you to move to the area in the first place? And they're like, I know this one too. This is easy. You say, well, what are some of the big changes that you've seen in all the time that you've been here? You say, well, how's the house performed for you over the timeline? What are some of the changes that you've made for it through that timeline? If somebody new was to be owning this house and not you, what are some of the things that they should definitely know about that would help them really appreciate the value that a house like this could provide for somebody? Oh, and by the way, what is it that's prompted you to think about potentially making a move? I just found out their motivation for moving without saying, what is motivating you to move? See, now that I've got to present day, I then go fast forward. So like, where are you potentially thinking about possibly going from here? See the movement in those questions? Where are you thinking about possibly potentially going from here? They can answer that freely. Why are you selling? Friction.
I think all this leads, the ideal outcome is that they feel like they bought, they don't feel like they got sold. And I think by using that construct, so we teach our teams a couple core principles, and it's amazing how much your teachings overlap with our basic fundamentals. Because you said this, therefore follows this, it guarantees that, in other words, one of our core tenets is you shouldn't tell them information until you know it's the right answer. Correct. And so if you're always basically erring on the side of caution to make sure anything you tell them is 100% right, then you're going to stay in that curiosity to make sure whatever you do say lands properly, and that you're staying in empathy. You understand their situation.
The easiest metaphor I'd wrap around this, and let's get some yes no's for those that are in the chat here, is has anybody in the chat ever asked anybody the big question, the will you marry me question? See, when you ask that big question, the will you marry me question, honestly, how big of a question really is it? You're not shooting with 50-50 odds hoping they might say yes. You're not even 75-25. Chances are you're a touch more certain than that. You're probably 98.2, 99.1, 99.6.4. Like, you want to understand, did I do it right? But you're not thinking, is this direction of travel completely foreign to the other person? It's just the next natural step. What you should be inviting people to do with your big asks in your business is the next natural step. If it feels like too big of a step, you haven't asked enough questions. You haven't had enough shared experience to know what the right course of action is, at which point you are guessing, and guessing is dangerous. Shooting from too far out is dangerous and it's unnecessary.
Pat just said, I didn't ask. I just put the ring in her pocket.
Yeah.
It's called an assumptive close is what that is. That's an assumptive close.
I thought that was great.
Mm-hmm.
Good job, Pat. Good job. Phil, I've got a question for you with NAR. I wrote it down here so I didn't forget it. What do you think that agents are missing the point on when it comes to the whole NAR situation?
I think the big thing that is frighteningly concerning is people aren't giving any consideration about where this is going to go next. People think it's about signing a buyer's agency agreement. It has nothing to do with that. It doesn't mean that that isn't an important part of a process in order for you to get paid your compensation. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying what the NAR settlement asked for was a more transparent and open landscape. What we're going to see more of is we're going to see a more open book of business on both the buy side and the sell side, with consumers educated at a higher level than they ever have been before. So they are going to be asking questions, whether out loud or behind your back, is what is the difference between you and other people like you? Buy side and sell side, everywhere. You are going to see new players coming to the market that are offering what seems to be the same as you for significantly less. And I believe there are two types of people that are going to win in this post-NAR world. And that's going to be the best and the cheapest. If you are not the best and you can't articulate it well, and you are not the cheapest, good luck. Because you're going to be obsolete. So it means that you have to add more specificity to where you are the best. Nobody on this call is the best agent for every client in their neighborhood. Nobody. Yet there are certain groups of people that you are the best agent in the world for. That there is nobody in your marketplace that could serve that person better. And that's where your value carries more value. That's where you can be affording yourself to be able to earn the big bucks. I would not be afraid of specificity right now. I'd be leaning into specificity. You are best served to help the person that perhaps you used to be. So if you're new to the business and you've only just bought your first home coming out of a rental, you are the #1 agent in your area that can help people move out of rentals and into their first home. And if you want to get into the luxury market and you've never sold a luxury home and you're currently living in a rental, you best do something to mean that you've got knowledge of the luxury market that is above and beyond anybody else. And that might be that you have to run a content series or an interview play and build a body of work that means that you curate experience as opposed to have real world experience. And then what you are is the #1 pick in your neighborhood for knowing more about luxury real estate than anybody else, because you've interviewed 100 people that own or have purchased luxury real estate. So there's no wrong way, but there's no shortcuts anymore. There's no like, just be quick and get lucky. You got to be good enough. And then when you get the opportunity, you've got to be able to articulate why you're good enough, because consumers are going to be told, don't pay big money when it's not worth it. Don't pay big money when it's not worth it. So if you want to maintain big money, learn how to communicate where you're worth it and how you're worth it.
I think it's a bit about like, so before real estate, I played sports. It's kind of like people just want to be the best at sports. It's like, well, no, pick one and get really good at that one thing. Real estate, they're independent contractors and businesses spread so diffuse. For example, in our overall brokerage at Keller Williams, where our primary team is, to get into the top 10%, you really only have to sell about 10 or 8 houses per year. And so agents are constantly caught in this cycle of scarcity. Well, I have to appeal to everyone because I don't have enough business. And that's the kiss of death. Because if you're trying to be everything to everyone, you're nothing to nobody. And so we have an expression in our organization, don't make me niche slap you. Pick something where you're most valuable and put all of your focus into that one thing. And so there was a question here about, what if you're a new agent trying to get your first piece of business and you're trying to differentiate yourself? Well, just like what Phil said, you have to basically find out your ideal avatar, figure out what their situation is and why you're the best person for them. So regardless of the fact that you have no experience and someone may have a lot of experience, you can make an offer that differentiates yourself. And so that all comes from being specific and clear-eyed on who your ideal client is. which most agents never even do. They gloss over sales practices 101.
What I would do if I was looking to differentiate, build value prop right now is I would complete an exercise I call a 3x3. I'd pick 3 avatars of missing people that you can help. And where would I go looking for those avatars? I'd think less about ideal client. I'd think about like what is the most realistic client that I could deliver value to. If I'm a brand new agent, well, I might be looking at people moving from out of town. I might be looking at helping first-time buyers. And on the sell side, I'd be looking for people who aren't necessarily in a rush. Because what I have as a new agent is I have sweat equity. I have the willingness to be able to do more work than other people. So who are the people who appreciate more work? Well, somebody buying from out of town. Like we bought an apartment here in New York City when we were living in the UK, and we bought it sight unseen. What was an agent that was valuable to me to buy an apartment in New York City when I'm buying sight unseen? Is somebody that is going to go and see anything and everything on my behalf, take FaceTime videos, put all of that sweat equity into the transaction was super valuable to me. If a established agent was like, I want to be pre-qualified, I want to understand all of the details that you're looking for, is like, is you do your shortlist and then we'll go out. Like, no, not interested. Is I needed somebody to run around town for me. So I'd pick 3 specific avatars, probably 2 on the buy side, 1 on the sell side. And then what I'd do is I'd ask myself, what are the 3 biggest problems that exist to those people? And then I'd set my stall out accordingly. 3 people, 3 problems, 3 people, 3 problems, 3 people, 3 problems. What you've now got is you've now got 9 I help X achieve Y statements. I help first-time buyers understand the area so they can make smart choices on where they buy their first home. I help first-time buyers access capital at lower rates and with lower deposits to maximize their affordability. I help first-time buyers get a foot in the door on properties that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to see. Okay. I help people moving from out of town understand neighborhoods so that they can make smart choices about their commute to work. I help people who are buying out of town leverage the time that they have when they're in town shopping so that what they don't do is have to miss a perfect house because they didn't have the time to be able to do so. I help people that are moving from out of town be able to feel like they've got a friend on the ground for every step of the transaction, even when they're hundreds of miles away. See what I'm saying here? Is we have appreciating value because we can understand where we're going to put it. And if you're wondering where to point yourself, if you don't have the experience in real estate, where do you have the experience in people? So if I come back to a point that you made earlier, Robert, is like you came out of pro sports. If you were brand new, well, you could probably help athletes and aspiring athletes to be able to go on their real estate journey because you can talk to them in their language. You understand the puzzles that they have. So if you're a chemical engineer and now you become a real estate, where are there engineers in your neighborhood that are looking to move? So look for where you have specificity in people, not specificity and experience in real estate. And they'll value the fact that you know them and you're prepared to be able to do the work on real estate. But if you don't work to marry these things up, you're trying to sell like vegan food to a carnivore. Don't matter how good you're going to do it, it's probably not going to work too well, right?
The best. I love that. Phil, I've got something you said with the 3x3. I realized that if you outline that, that could also be the way you show up on social media. You just created content for yourself forever.
It's all there. I help X achieve Y, and then you go 3x3x3, and now you're at 27. And that's people on problem and then examples of problem. It's everything. But it's your buyer's representation presentation, it's your buyer's console, it's your social content, it's your web shop front. And I would look to say that you should be banning the words buyers and sellers from your vocabulary in its entirety, because if you cannot add specificity to either of those 2 labels, you are hoping to get lucky.
I hope you guys are appreciating this. In my experience, I'll pen a quote from Chris Voss: "The most dangerous negotiation is the one you don't know you're in." Everything in life is a negotiation, especially in business. And I think if you mastered what Phil's talking about, you would be a top agent. I think, real estate's different in the fact that in most sales organizations, you make the sale, you're the point of sale, and then you turn it over to another person to fulfill the service. You have a sales side and a fulfillment side. In real estate, we're both the salesperson and the servicer, but you don't get the opportunity to service until you've made the sale. And I have friends that have walked into private equity and VC firms with pre-revenue companies, meaning they haven't sold anything. They've made zero money and walk out with over $100 million in funding. That's power when you can convince someone of an idea. So if your question is, how do I get my first deal without having any prior sales experience? Well, look around. People do it every day of the week with much more big ticket items than a commission on a sale of a first house.
But you do it where you know you can over deliver. You don't want to feel like you're on the back foot, because you think we build our business on our reputations. You also kill your business on your reputation if you do not over deliver upon the promise, which is why I'd look at areas where your known value to that group of people is definitely going to be valuable. And what's interesting, like Janet here in the chat says, my education is in marriage and family therapy. Like, could be of value to those I get to work with? And the answer would be yes. If you were looking to do more real estate transactions, why don't you set your stall out to help newlyweds to purchase their first home together? Like, you've got an empathetic lens on the value that a home has on supporting a marriage, and you could probably approach it on people looking to sell going through marriage difficulties. You could be looking at being able to say that anybody that is keen to explore the possibilities of buying land or developing a family compound, you could have a level of emotional education into saying what would make that work for family dynamics. And I'm spitballing here, but I'm trying to get people to understand there are areas where you're an 11 out of 10, and there are areas where you're a 6 out of 10, and they both involve real estate transactions. Why not operate where you're in a marketplace of one, where you are the best in the world at being able to help that person do that in that neighborhood? Because work gets more fun. And answer me this in the chat, just honestly, is how many times have you worked with a client that you wish you didn't have to meet ever again in your life? And it's almost always because you worked with the people that chose you, not that you went to work with the people that you chose. And there's a giant difference between sales and marketing. We've had a decade of looking to be marketeers, and what marketeers do is they get bees around the honey pot. They say, the honey's so sweet, come along, you're going to like it. But what we get is anybody and everybody, including other people's waste. That's who you might have knocking on your door, is other people's waste. By alternative, if you set your stall out with specificity and go after the kinds of people that you want to be able to work with, you spend more time working with the people that you want to work with. Work gets more fun. You do better work. Your reputation grows at a higher level. And there was another question in the chat. It's like, if you get hyper specific, do you like leave money on the table? Do you kind of cut people out? And the answer is yes, you do, on purpose. However, if you do a 3x3 and you're this person, this person, and this person, what many people do is to say, well, if you're good enough for them, you're good enough for me. If you're good enough for them, you're good enough for me. If you're good enough for them, you're good enough for me. Because you actually catch the peripheries. The way I view it is, if you were playing the game of darts and you didn't know what number you were shooting for, you'd probably miss the board. But when you decide you're shooting at triple 20 or bullseye or at double 11, almost every time you miss, you still contribute towards your score. Yet if you was not aiming at something specific where you knew that that would be the ideal value you're looking for at that period of time, you might have hit the ceiling, the bartender, the floor. You could have hit all sorts of other different directions. But at least when you had something solid to go at, every time you missed, you still contribute towards your score.
Yeah, I mean, look
Another way
at
of looking at this is if you wanted to open a tin of beans, a can of beans, what utensil would you look for? Not a Swiss Army knife or a Leatherman. You'd be looking for a can opener. So be the can opener. Just identify what cans you're looking to open.
Tuna, canned, chili is pretty good too. I like that. Robert, how about you?
protein, tuna, salmon.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Bill, what kind of do you eat at you had black
beans? Black beans. Black beans out the can. Yeah, they're good for my burritos.
No.
You know, in response to Ben's comment, first, one little exercise you could do just for one day, just keep track of every ad that you get served, whether it's driving down the street, whether it's on social media, whether it's on YouTube, watching a video, listening to a podcast, an Audible, on TV. Count the number of times you get served an ad. And if that ad doesn't appeal to you, does it turn you off from that company? No, people are so oversaturated with seeing advertising that if you choose to be very specific in your ad, if it doesn't resonate with someone, they'll just keep scrolling. But if it's specific and it matches their situation, their response rate will be dramatically higher. And if you don't believe us, I mean, Tristan and I do this all the time, but you can go spend a few $100s on ad campaigns and see for yourself. If you use a very general call out and general offer, general messaging, you will get a low response rate, low performance, and anyone that does respond will not be a match to your target client, which is what Phil's talking about. That's how you'll be dealing with clients that are outside of your buy box. But if you're very specific, you'll get a higher response rate, better CPLs, and the people that respond will be within your ideal client profile. That's how you build a business. Not by appealing to everyone, by appealing to the people that you want to work with.
Robert, I'm going to share something else I think is going to be useful here right now. Remember I said earlier on that your value is only appreciated, it's only valuable where it's both appreciated and it's appreciating. It's easier for your value to appreciate over time. The mistake that many people make in the real estate window is they're only looking at 30, 60, 90-day timelines. If somebody is ready to be able to move, I'm going to give value to you now. If you play from further back, your value can appreciate at a higher level of time. This is a beautiful industry because almost everybody over the age of 18 or 21 at some point in time is going to make a move in some direction or another. And what data tells us is that's likely to be in 7 years or less. In 7 years or less, almost everybody over the age of 21 is going to make a real estate move in some direction or other. So you want a prospecting hack that can help you. Is there a hobby that you've been meaning to pick up? Is there a hobby that you used to do and you stopped doing because you got busy with work? Is there a passion that you hold that you try to hide outside of your workplace and keep it a secret? What I'm saying is don't. Make it highly visible. If you used to love flower arranging, go back and start going to flower arranging classes. And if you're the person that loves flower arranging and a professional real estate agent, you've just built a target market avatar that says, I help people that love flower arranging to be able to find their next home. And because of the shared passion that you can carry through a stressful scenario, you're in good shape. If you want to become a better cook or a better baker, go take cooking classes with other people. Don't learn from YouTube videos. Go get out in your community and learn to be able to follow your hobby or your passion at a higher level. And don't force real estate down their neck. Wait for them to ask you what you do. And when they ask you what you do, you respond by saying, I help X achieve Y. Not, I'm a real estate agent. What you do is you say, well, you know how families often find themselves buying a home in the area and then realizing they need a different one? Well, what I do is I help those people navigate the complexities of being able to sell that house for the right money, finding a good house next for them, and navigating the complexities of finances and moving and the logistics that come in between. I'm like, how do you do that then? And then you're like, what makes you ask? They're like, well, that's the exact situation me and my husband are in. And you're like, who knew? Who knew?
It's
But
literally
that's
just
what prospecting.
that's what your SOI is, just done conscientiously. I was with an agent in a luxury market last week that he loves golf. He goes and signs up. What's the terminology where you're just a one, and he will find people that need someone to complete a twosome or a foursome and go golf with them. The week before, he golfed with a billionaire that had an exit, and now he's going to get a multi-million-dollar transaction off that by just being there with doing what you love. First thing I do when I moved to a new area was try all the gyms and find the one that's the right match, because if you go early in the morning, who tends to be at gyms early in the mornings? High achievers, people that are running businesses that have to get to the office. Like one of my best friends moved down from New York down to here, same gym, met a guy at the gym, got his first transaction in a brand new market at $17 million. By meeting someone at the gym and doing what you said, I help people achieve A by Z.
Right. And it's this easy. Instead, what we're saying as an industry is like, go sit in a room for hours and call people on the telephone, which is stupid because people don't answer their phones anymore. We have to wake up and understand the truth in that. And what we do is we set ourselves up to fail because we make work miserable when it doesn't have to be. And I'm not saying that you should never call people, but in 2024, it's highly unlikely that calling people unannounced is going to lead to meaningful connection and conversation. What it demonstrates often is a level of desperation. And if there's one thing you need to win in this business that doesn't get talked about enough, it's posture. You need to have a level of posture and confidence in any scenario that you stepped into that I can do this. And if your initial outreach is please pick me, please pick me, please pick me, I'm desperate for business, you're already playing with reduced status. You're already up against it. So I would look for the environments of where your status is elevated. And to be pulley and not pushy, you can build a barrage of inbound business. And I'll let you into a secret. I've never bought a list. I've never bought an ad. Never paid for leads. And you want an interesting statistic in the real estate business? Is there are around 6 million homes sold last year, right? Around 6 million homes. Zillow sold 30 million leads.
And they sell 30. They sell 30 million leads every year.
Right.
They're selling the same
everybody. Yeah. And it's all because we don't have a sticky enough connection that what we're looking for, if we're going to go back to the golf analogy, is we're looking for other people to give us 3-yard putts. When if you just get a little further out, you can be in a relationship of one and not have to give up your money, not have to have people try to argue with why do I have to pay you that much when you haven't done that much. Just do a little more from further out and watch people be real happy to pay you the money.
Well, Zillow does a good job on hitting those 4 things you talked about earlier, right? Which is money, time, risk, and status. And we know real estate agents love status. So
Right. We give you a gold star and we tell you that this is going to save you time and help make you more money. And look how much riskier this is not going to be for you when you've got predictable lead flow.
Yeah, that's nuts, man. That is
But it's
crazy.
predictable lead flow if you go play pickleball every Thursday night with 25 other dudes that are, of a similar world to you. Like, habit stack the challenges that you're having in your life by you don't have any time for hobbies and fun. Turn your hobbies and fun into prospecting. Watch how your life changes.
Phil, what do you think the most challenging objection is right now? I know that's a very general question, but what's the most challenging one that you've faced recently with all your coaching clients?
And repeat the question for me again, sorry, Robert.
What would be, in your opinion, the most challenging objection a realtor is going to face today?
Most challenging. I think a recurringly challenging objection that's going to be difficult for many realtors is, what's the difference between you and the other guy? And it's only difficult because it's going to be recurring, and you haven't done the work. And most people will say, well, it's this and it's that. Like, everybody gives the same list. You say what makes you different, and they tell you the things that make you the same. So I think that's going to be the one that is an everyday objection that you should get more prepared for, with adding specificity. And if that objection is coming, you've already made a giant mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Should be able to lead with questions like, well, what do you understand about all your options when it comes to selling your home in a market like right now? And they're like, not much. You say, well, what is your experience about what it takes to be able to maximize return and to make the process seamless? They say, not much. You say, well, how important is it to you that you sell for a good price with minimal effort? They say it's pretty darn important. You say, well, how certain are you that you're going to want to do that with somebody who's done it before? Yeah, I'm remarkably certain. What do you understand about the different pricing strategies that we could utilize to be able to maximize return? Not much. You see, it's all questions. We should be able to avoid every objection as opposed to overcome it if we're that way inclined. But I tell you something the industry needs to get ready for that it's not ready for.
What?
Is all of the conversations about the different fee models that are going to be presenting themselves. And this is going to mean that buyer's compensation is going to be tiered in different agreements. Seller's compensation is going to be tiered in different agreements. It's going to become the Wild West, that you cannot make the assumptions that the seller is either providing a financial contribution to the buyer's agent or not. And it might be a fixed fee. It might be a low percentage. It might be a high percentage. It could be all over the page. And I think that conversation and negotiation, by getting strategic with the seller to help them understand the pros and cons of what compensation package they're putting together to be able to attract the right kind of buyer, is going to bring a host of objections that the market's not ready for. And I think the same is going to be true, that there are all these unknowns that can exist if you're representing buyers as to how much out of pocket the buyer might need to pay in closing costs because of the variables that are going to exist on the other side. And this isn't the sneak attack Apple terms and conditions of like, here's a buyer's agency agreement, and I know it says that you might need to pay me blank, but you probably won't need to pay it because it's highly likely going to be paid for on the seller side. Like the lazy Apple, just sign this, tick the box, and we'll get, it's highly unlikely going to cause a problem. Yeah, not going to happen. It's going to get messy. So you need to be ready for people to choose you ahead of time. And I make one thing remarkably clear on the record here that beats my mind in the real estate space. If you are representing buyers and one of your line items of value proposition is that you help them not pay more for the house than they should do, why is your fee indexed to purchase price? They are directly in competition with each other. I will save you money on the buy side. And by the way, if I don't save you money, then you pay me more. And that's going to come up soon on the buy side, is that an educated consumer that's being represented by a buyer's agent is going to say, that doesn't make sense. And you're going to go, you're right, it doesn't.
Performance-based compensation, which is also a way for you to overcome and mitigate risk for your clients. So if you're a first-time agent representing your first client, why don't you put your compensation in line with performance if they have doubts about your experience level?
Correct. Risk reversal, love it.
We basically have come full circle, because when you started, Phil, you said basically there's going to be the best and the cheapest.
Yeah.
What we basically mean is the majority of agents want to be in the middle, where it's messiest, where it's most cutthroat. It's a red ocean. There's sharks in the water. It's bloody, and everyone's just being compressed. And that's because if you haven't differentiated yourself on anything other than price is the only thing you can differentiate yourself on. And when you said everyone asks why you're different and we tell them why we're the same, like that, sometimes people say things that we already know, but you just express it in a way that's like brilliance. Like that literally encapsulates what 98% of agents are doing right now. And that's why they're struggling to secure their compensation, much less increase their compensation.
Tammy writes a question here in the chat. Is it a good idea to buy leads from the sites such as Zillow, etc.? And I'm not going to say yes or no. I'm going to help you understand the consequences. If all you're doing is working leads that are in the final mile that want to jump towards showings, the ability for you to articulate your value in that tight window, in that tight moment, is stacked against you. It's like you trying to win a marriage proposal on a blind date, knowing the chapel's booked for tomorrow. Like it's all hedged against you to be able to make it work. is if you're being strategic and you're committed to being a professional real estate agent, then I would be working a 5-year pipeline minimum. Not a 30, 60, 90, a 5-year pipeline. And I'd be prospecting everybody that I know, and I'd want to understand their potential housing goals at any point over the next 5 years. And what you should be able to look at is to say, well, I got, 17 families that are thinking about making a move in 2026. Why would you not do that today? Instead of like, I've got a red hot lead that needs to move by like next weekend. Is play the longer game, and you'll weed out the rest of the minnows in the industry that cannot survive that long. And if you have to snack on some fast food of online leads to be able to help you run the distance, I get it. It's called oxygen. It's going to help you run the distance. But don't live on fast food. Mm-hmm. Use it to be able to help you go the distance if you don't have anything better to play with in the meantime. But start building a book of business that's 5 years deep, not 30, 60, 90, so that you don't have to rely on snacking on lazy leads.
Phil, on that note, as you're saying, like these snackable closings, if you apply the 5-year pipeline idea to it, you're in essence also building out those that don't want to transact right now, but are going to transact 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, which is great.
Why not? And then you protect yourself. Marketplace of one, your value could appreciate over a period of time. You understand the factors that are affecting maybe what's going to trigger the move. You're not saying, are you ready yet? Are you ready yet? You're like, how's Johnny getting on at high school?
Yeah, so true.
Right, you're talking to them, and all of your follow-ups and circling back and base touching isn't following up and circling back and base touching. You're in a never-ending conversation with them about what's changing in their world. And if somebody's staying in their house for 8 years solid, they don't need to know where their equity is every 12 months. True. They might need to understand the pricing changes in the market that they're potentially moving to. They might want to understand unique financial products that could allow them to buy both if access to home equity, et cetera, gave them the freedom to be able to buy in the new location and be able to spread accordingly, or if where they're looking to move to is going to have a rapid spike in pricing and where they're currently at is likely to be flat, they might want to buy earlier in the new location where they're planning to go in 8 years' time and stick a tenant in it for 3 years so they can hedge their results over there. And like, it changes the way you can help people when you know what they're trying to help.
Very true.
As we wrap up, I want to call out one thing about what Phil was just saying about the third-party leads, specifically with the big aggregators, the big lead types, the search engines. Everything Phil's talking about in terms of your ability to communicate and negotiate starts with the offer we make. The offer is what opens the door when we enter into the communication about the first business conversation. But what agents have done for the last 20 years since Zillow opened doors in 2005 is outsource in increasing numbers that offer making process to clients. Instead of, in a traditional sales business, you would put an ad out there in order to get clients to respond. And that's how you would drum up leads. Now we just write a check to a third party where we've outsourced that whole aspect of the process, which is part of the reason why all the agents are making the same general offer. I'll help you buy or sell instead of something very specific. So I just wanted to point out, it's like a poison, it's a necessary poison, or that some would argue, the more you pay, the more you get relied upon this. And it's created these bad habits over 2 decades. And that's why agents are struggling to differentiate themselves, because they don't pay attention to the art of making offers and then constructing your value from that.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. Very true. Phil, what book do you wish people would pay more attention to that just didn't get as much love? You're like, damn it, I wish that one would have done great because it's awesome.
Of one that I've written or somebody else's?
Yours, out of the 11.
2, I think, are ridiculously relevant right now. One is a book called The Work Before the Work that I co-wrote with a guy called Paul Caffrey, and I knew that it wouldn't do well. That was part of the premise of me creating it under this title, is people don't want to do the work, let alone the work before the work. But it's a book about sales preparation that helps you stand out from a crowd before the game's even started. Okay. And then the second is a book that I co-authored with a lady called Melanie Diesel, and it's called Prove It. And it couldn't be more relevant than what's needed for this type of conversation we're having here around the NAR piece. It's not how do you say, that you are different to others. It's how do you prove that you're different to others? What is the body of evidence that means that the claims that you're making can be actually backed up with unequivocal evidence to be able to allow you to show up in your buyer consoles and your listing presentations and prove that you're the right choice for the job. And prove it allows you to be able to run claim audits, helps you understand how you can make more effective claims about the things that make you different. But both Prove It and The Work Before the Work would be 2 books that would give people insights if they really want to win.
Perfect. Just picked them up, put them on my cart on Amazon. Phil, thank you so much for this. Robert, thank you for putting it all together. And everyone else, thanks for jumping in and asking great questions and participating. Follow Phil. He's got his domain, his I was going to call it a gamer tag because I play so many games. I'm like, it's not a gamer tag. It's your Instagram
handle.
Yeah, Instagram handle. And if people want like the role play cards and stuff that we're being referred to, shoot me a note on my Instagram, mention the word role play, and we'll get the link across to you from there.
Appreciate
Fantastic.
it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Tristan.